TCAP teacher here. I just got back from teaching for 6 months in remote Alaska, and I keep getting the same questions over and over and over again. So I figured I would do a video, not only to help, you know, answer those questions, but also because when I was researching moving to Alaska to teach, there's not a lot of information out there. Now, yes, in a sense there is a lot of information, because information that you find about teaching in remote Alaska, you don't find about teaching in the lower 48. They don't tell you how to get food there. They don't tell you, you know, what to expect as far as, you know, culture and all of those things. So I really just wanted to take some time to talk to you guys and tell you what my experience was like. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is just that. This is my experience. This does not speak for the umpteen amount of school districts in Alaska. This doesn't speak for the different tribes. This doesn't speak for all of the different regions and cultures. This is my personal experience, and I want to emphasize that, because there are a lot of hot topics that I will probably be touching on, and I don't want anyone to come at me and say, you know, this is a terrible thing to put out there. These are topics that need to be talked about, and these are experiences that I experienced, and these are things that happen, unfortunately, and these are things that our children or our students experience. So I want to emphasize that this is my experience in a, you know, Native Alaskan community, but this doesn't speak for the whole thing. So overall, would I recommend this to anybody? Absolutely. I can't emphasize enough how amazing of an experience it was to teach in remote Alaska. Was it easy? No. Teaching there is hard. Living there is hard. Adjusting is hard, but so worth it professionally and personally speaking. One of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. So, kind of funny story, my housemate and I, we were sitting there making a list, and we were like, if anyone ever asked us, what would we tell them it was like? So we came up with a really random list, and I know it's going to seem like the most oddball things. However, for our village, it totally makes sense, and I'm sure for a lot of other villages it does too. So I am going to read you off our list and just tell you a little bit about each, and then I'm going to go into more in-depth questions that I keep getting that I really feel like should be touched on. So first things first, ice cleats. Oh my goodness. I never understood how important ice cleats were until I moved there, and I never knew that there were different types of ice cleats. Now you're probably like, ice cleats, what are they? They are just that. They are little straps that go onto your shoes. They're like made of rubber, metal, whatever. They help you walk on ice because there's a lot of ice there. And I bought yak tracks. Nobody told me don't buy yak tracks. Yak tracks are wonderful for traction. However, the way that their metal pieces are spiraled, they get caught in the snow grates that a lot of buildings have in, you know, remote places. And they're the grates that allow snow to go through walkways without, you know, having to shovel very often. So yak tracks, they get caught. I found this out the hard way. I was walking out of my school, which is about 4 or 5 stairs. Let me just tell you, my one got caught as I was kind of rushing out the door to catch the bus. I almost went headfirst down the stairs. Thankfully, I somehow landed at the bottom with 2 feet on the ground, and even the bus driver said, I don't know how you stuck that landing, but I'm impressed. I was impressed too, trust me. So yak tracks are wonderful. However, if your community has those snow grates on their walkways, yak tracks are a no-go. I will try to insert the link of the ones that I bought that I absolutely love. They don't get caught, they last forever, and they're pretty cheap. So I'll link those in the description down below. Another topic, and this one is hard for me to talk about, dogs in villages. Now, like I said, this does not apply to all villages. This is just my experience with my school district, my village. Dogs are, I'm a dog lover. Anyone that knows me knows that I am obsessed with dogs. I mean, I literally fed random stray dogs out my classroom window just because nobody cared about them. My dogs are my life. I live alone. It's just me and my 2 lab mixes, and dogs are my world. I, you know, volunteer time at the animal shelter because I love dogs. I always have. So I worked in a village where people abuse dogs left and right. They're kicked, they're beaten, they're killed. I heard stories about one woman trying to throw puppies into the river because she just didn't want them anymore. They also hold puppy shoots, which completely breaks my heart. And yes, that is exactly what it sounds like. Once or twice a year, they have bounties for those that kill dogs. They go around and shoot them. If they have a collar, they're not supposed to be shot. However, without getting too into this, rules there, not always followed, and they will remove the collar, shoot the dog, and bring the tail in for money. So I almost came home with 2 or 3 dogs that I fell in love with. They were in a terrible situation. However, they belong to families of my students, and I couldn't just, you know, be like, hey, I want your dog. I think they deserve better. So some villages, you know, dogs are not treated like they are in the lower 48. It's a cultural thing. They're treated like garbage, honestly. And it completely broke my heart. And I feel like if you're an animal lover, that is something you need to be prepared for. I have seen pictures from other educators in other villages of dead puppies in snowbanks. So if you are an animal lover, this is just something that you need to be prepared for. I wish somebody would have warned me a little bit better, but they didn't. And I had to learn all of this on my own. So that is a very, very tough one for me. Like I said, I'm an animal lover, and it just broke my heart to see these dogs just be treated the way they were, and all they wanted was love. I mean, they're just like kids. They just want to be loved. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because as an animal lover, that was something that, I mean, I cried myself to sleep one night over how one of the dogs I knew was treated. And it's tough. I would buy dog food and dog treats and feed all of the dogs as much as I could. If I had leftover food, instead of throwing it out, it would go to the dogs. They run free all over the place. They're not fixed. They're not treated by vets. It's a terrible situation. But like I said, it's a cultural thing. That's what they do there. So another one that applied to my village, and from what I hear, quite a few other villages as well, lice and bed bugs. Personal hygiene isn't a top priority there. My students wore a lot of the same clothes every single day for weeks at a time. I had one student that didn't even have running water, and I know that on one side of town, running water wasn't a thing for them until, you know, recent years, as in like the last 3, 4, 5 years. So personal hygiene isn't really as important there. You know, it's an exciting day for them, and I would hear about, oh, I got to shower this weekend. So that is something that comes with its price. Lice being one of them. I had so many of my children that had to shave their heads because the parents didn't want to treat the lice. The only way they treated it was shave their heads. Girls or boys, heads shaved. Another issue is bed bugs. My first day in my classroom, my kids started freaking out because they found a bed bug on the carpet. It was something that I was not warned about. I wish I had been warned about, but I wasn't. I would have brought like lice treatment just in case. Now, thankfully, I didn't catch bed bugs. I didn't catch lice. I kept my things separate from them, from the students' belongings, just because once I arrived, I was warned about those 2 huge issues. So I kept all of my things separate. I kept my coat, my bag, everything in its own closet while my student stuff was on the other side of the classroom. Yes, I found a bed bug in my apartment, but thankfully it was just one, wasn't an infestation, but still something that I really wish I had known about. That was one of the most disgusting things ever, but I made it through. It was 6 months. If they can live in that, I can do it for 6 months. Another huge issue in villages, alcoholism. I don't even know where to start on this issue. Heartbreaking. Alcohol runs their lives. They drink incessantly. They drink a lot, and it's because it was recently legalized in the village. So it's like a new thing. Everybody wants to do it. They will spend $100 on a bottle of R&R, which is rich and rare. And it's disgusting, not gonna lie. But alcoholism is a huge issue, which leads to huge issues in other facets of my students' lives. I had one student and her sisters that actually slept in our guest room in our apartment building because her dad was drunk. That was a normal occurrence, and it's an ongoing issue. You would hear horror stories about people getting beat up and just traumatic experiences, not only for the adults, but for the students too. So that was something that I know is a big issue in the village that I taught in, but it's also a huge issue in other villages. If you watch Alaska State Troopers, you would know that almost every single call they go on to the remote villages, alcohol related. As awful as it is, it's the truth, it's the way of life, and it's because, like I said, it was recently legalized there. So it's a new thing. It's like, you know, that's their drug of choice, basically. So that was one thing that affected my students' lives. I had students that would come in and they would make jokes about chugging or make jokes about passing out or taking shots, and that was just, that's all they know, that's all they've experienced. So it was just heartbreaking for me to see that their lives are affected this much by alcohol already. I've had some of my 5th graders were drinking already, they were smoking weed already. Like, that's just mind-blowing to me. They're basically losing their childhood to alcohol. The next one, I can't help but laugh because, goodness gracious. Wi-Fi and cell service. Now, not all villages have the issues that I have. We didn't even have 3G cell service. We had, I don't even know what you would call it. It had the E in the corner, extended edge, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the E stands for, but it basically, you know, stands for good luck. So we had like no cell service. I could barely text message half the time. A lot of them would get kicked back. A lot of text messages, if I text somebody, I can't tell you how many people would tell me, oh, your text messages are coming through twice. And I'm like, that's because they're trying to go through as an iMessage, but they end up going through as a text message. So they're sending twice. And same thing for receiving. I would receive, oh my gosh, if I got a text message, I would receive them all double. No joke, we would get so excited when when we're at home, because we don't have Wi-Fi at our apartment, because I'll get to that in a second. But we would literally run down the hallways to each other's apartments, be like, oh my God, you can check your email, check your email, check your email, because we had like strong enough service for a brief moment that we could actually check emails and those kinds of things. We couldn't ever go on social media, like that just wasn't even an option, but you could occasionally get enough service to check your email, which, yes, it was that exciting that we would literally sprint down the hallway and alert our housemates that we could now check our emails. So as far as Wi-Fi goes, I will never, ever complain about slow Wi-Fi ever again. Did I say ever? Because I mean ever. I don't even know where to start. It was awful. Honestly, the only thing that could have been worse was just not having it at all, which we pretty much did. You couldn't do anything because it was just that slow and that sporadic. It would just kick off sometimes, and other times it would be like, oh, now I'm gonna be lightning speed fast, but then no, 2.5 seconds later it's just donezo. So that, it was an experience to say the least. Like I said, I will never ever complain about slow Wi-Fi ever again, because nothing could be worse than that. I believe it's satellite, and we were gonna get it at the compound, which is where we live. That's what we affectionately named it. We were gonna get Wi-Fi there. However, for 40 gigs of data, it was over $150. So we all just kind of said, we're done. If we want to use it on the weekends or anything, you know, during the week, we will go stay late during the week and we will walk to the school on the weekends, which we did pretty often, just so that we could have some Wi-Fi and, you know, have some form of social life and let our families know that we are still alive. We didn't get eaten by bears or moose. So next one, sorry, I'm looking at my phone because I have a lot of like the questions and the things that we kind of came up with on here. The next one, this is a good one. Quality of food and excitement over food. My village had 2 stores. We had a store in Upper, we had a store in Lower, and they were surprisingly more well stocked than I anticipated. I'm not even gonna lie. I expected, you know, convenience store type food, but no, they had a lot. The only issue was that the quality wasn't there. A lot of instant foods, a lot of just quick, easy meals. If they had produce, it wasn't always fresh. I will never forget, we were walking through the store the one day. We got really excited that they had lemons. They had just gotten them in that morning and we went to grab them and I was like, this lemon, you know, it feels a little funny. And I turned it over and that's because it was just covered in green and white mold. So fresh food wasn't always an option. However, I will say fresh moose, because they did a lot of moose hunts. Fresh moose was amazing. We had a lot of salmon. We had some reindeer. I had a lot of bison. But as far as like fruits, vegetables, it's a no-go. Frozen is your best option. Getting food into the village is extremely expensive and difficult. You have to ship a lot of it in from Anchorage and you have to buy it, you know, ship it, and I carried some on a plane, but that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But quality of food was very, very rough to adjust to, and it's something that everyone should be aware of because, oh man, going from eating fresh food whenever I wanted to, that was not easy. I'm pretty sure I put on like 5 or 10 pounds just because fresh food wasn't an option. And if you went to the store and if they had food, because it's not like they can just drive a truck in, everything has to be flown in. If it was bad weather, they didn't get a lot of shipments. But anyway, it was just a lot of quick foods. They always had Pop-Tarts and SpaghettiOs and Chef Boyardee and pasta. They had things like that, and it was extremely difficult to eat healthy on that type of foods option. You didn't have access to fresh foods. Now, I will say you can have, it's almost like a subscription box for fruits and vegetables that comes out of, I think it's Seattle, if I remember correctly. And they did ship to my village. However, thankfully I shipped in enough of frozen stuff that I was okay. It was enough to get me by. Probably not as much as I should have been eating, but it was enough to get me by. So that is an option. If you are thinking about teaching in Alaska, I highly suggest, I forget the name of the company, but I will link it down in the description. I've heard amazing things. I know quite a few people that use them in my village and in other villages. So, oh god, it's a farm out of Seattle. Oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name, but I will link it down in the description because I heard wonderful things. I personally didn't use them, but reviews are still there. Another huge thing that is important is proper gear. Now, for my village, it was proper winter gear, like cold weather gear, snow gear. In other villages, it may be proper rain gear. It all depends. It could be proper wind gear. All depends on what region of the state you're living in because they all have different weather phenomena. So for me, like I said, it was cold weather and snow gear. I spent a lot of money preparing for snow gear. Now, I lived in Maine. Our temperatures were right on par with what I experienced in Alaska, though the negative, like the 20 below, it wasn't as an extended period of time. In Maine, it usually lasts for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks if it's really, you know, we're in a cold front. But Alaska was just, it was a longer period of cold weather. So for me personally, I spent a lot of money on winter gear. Now, like I said, I lived in Maine. I should have had all of this. However, I've recently lost over 200 pounds now, and I didn't have a lot of winter gear. I had a down coat, but it was a 3X, and I now wear a medium. Actually, I didn't have snow pants from when I was at my heaviest, so I needed snow pants. I had snow boots, but they were also a size too big because apparently your feet can shrink. So I had to get all of those things. I had to get new gloves because mine were for cold weather, but not quite as cold as I was going to be experiencing. And also my hands got smaller. So those were all things that you just need to keep in mind. You need to have the proper gear. Like I said, it could be wind, rain, winter, cold weather. Like, you don't know what it is. That is something that you get to your village and you can learn about it then. Now for me, that wasn't an option. I was coming in January, so it was the middle of winter. I needed to at least have a general idea of what I was going to need. So I did keep in contact with my principal and some other teachers that were there, and they told me what worked best as far as winter gear or just gear that I needed to live there. Okay, my next one is my favorite one, moose. So I love moose. Living in Maine for the past 6 years, I've seen plenty of moose. I love them, can't get enough of them. I saw so many and they were up close. I will never forget, it was like my second week of teaching and my students are all at lunch and I see the shadow outside my window and I'm just like, whatever, it's probably someone walking by. But then I'm like, that was a little taller than the normal person, you know, when they walk by my window. I look up, it's a moose strolling by my classroom, which was amazing. I saw probably 2 to 3 moose a week. There was, actually it was more than that because I remember going like 3 weeks without having not seen a moose every day. So moose are amazing. We saw a lot of fox. I only saw one bald eagle in our village. I'm trying to think, but moose is the big one. They're beautiful, lovely animals. As terrible as this is, also very delicious. Which once upon a time I used to be vegetarian, so I almost feel bad saying that, but I don't because moose is delicious, guys. They are cute and they taste great, which is terrible, but it is what it is. You got to survive. So another one that my housemate and I came up with, the excitement of post office trips. And I know you're probably like, what on earth is this girl talking about? So living in a remote village, you have to ship everything in. Care packages from family, if you get them, they have to be shipped in. Any mail in general have to be shipped in. And it's, for me personally, the post office was about 1.5 miles away, so it's not like we could just walk there. Usually once a week we would make a trip, and it was because we were expecting packages from Amazon, which Prime works as far as pricing goes. We don't have to pay for shipping. However, it usually took 1 to 2 weeks for things to arrive. Sometimes it took a little bit more, but for the most part 1 to 2 weeks. And mail days, they were like Christmas, honestly. Like, I don't know how else to explain loading up in a truck or a van with your housemates and coworkers and going to pick up mail when you know that you have care packages or letters from friends and family, or, you know, an Amazon package for something that you ordered for you or your classroom or whatever. Mail days were like Christmas in the village. And I mean, we have pictures and videos from almost every mail day that we did because they were just that exciting. You get very excited, you find new hobbies when you live in a place that remote, and mail day was one of ours. So a hot topic that was an issue in my village, and this is difficult to talk about, but this is something that needs to be talked about. Incest and trauma, just overall trauma, was a huge issue in my village. I don't even know where to start with this one. I really don't. When you live in a place that remote, incest is bound to happen, and there was also so many people that just gave babies away that they don't know who's related to who. So sometimes it was incest without even knowing, which obviously leads to sometimes behavioral and developmental issues. But there's also a lot of trauma. A lot of people are beat up on a daily basis, especially women getting beat up by men, and people being deserted by this person, and this person killing this person, and this person got drunk and did this to X and Y and Z, and it was just a lot of trauma, and it affects the students. I had students that slept in our guest room in our apartment building because their dad was drunk, or I had students that would come to school and would have to sleep because their parents were up beating each other up until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. They couldn't sleep. And I had students that just, their parents weren't home, or their dad was drunk that night, or their mom was drunk, and it's heartbreaking. But you just have to show them that you're there because you care about them, and you're not trying to change their life. I mean, you wish you could, but unfortunately this is a situation that they're in, and you're just trying to expose them to a world. I went into this experience, and I think this is why I connected with my students as well as I did. I wasn't trying to change them. I wasn't trying to show them that there's better out there. I was just trying to show them that someone cares. And that was the big thing for me. I didn't care, and I know this is awful as a teacher, but because of their situations, their past, their traumas, I didn't care if they learned. I didn't care if they could tell me the difference between your and your. It didn't matter to me. What mattered to me with that group of kids was the fact they knew that I cared about them. The teacher that I had replaced, she walked out after 6 weeks. Literally walked in on Monday morning, walked out, never came back again. And then they had a teacher's aide that worked with them, which was my aide, and then I came in after Christmas. So they're deserted constantly. Their own parents desert them. They don't experience love and affection like they should be. So I was there too. If they needed someone to hug, they could give me a hug. If they needed someone to cry or talk to, they could talk to me. I was just there to let them know that people in the world care about them. That's it. If they learned something, great. I also just wanted to show them that there was a world outside of where they lived. You know, I will never forget my first day of teaching there. I let them ask questions, and some of the questions I got were just heartbreaking. Like, have you ever swum in a pool? What was it like? Have you ever seen the ocean? What was it like? These are questions that just, you don't expect from 4th and 5th graders. So just be prepared for possible traumas like that, depending where you're going in Alaska, or anywhere, honestly. Not just Alaska. You know, some areas of the country are more prone to things like this. The village that I taught in, unfortunately, was one of those, and it was heartbreaking. But like I said, if they could tell me the difference between there, and there, and two, and your, great, wonderful. That made me happy. But the thing that made me happiest was knowing that they knew that I cared. And one of my students on the last day of school, he was my problem child. He was the one that I went home crying one day. He was the one that I wanted to chug a bottle of wine almost daily. He was, I don't want to say he wasn't my problem child. He was just the one that pushed the limits every single day. He has a terrible home life. He's experienced things that no 5th grader in their life should ever have experienced. And on the last day of school, he gave me a hug, and he literally said to me, "Thank you for caring about me." And I had already lost it that day, but that just did me in. That's all I wanted for my students, was for them to know that Miss Morrow cared about them. Another big one, and I touched upon this a little bit with the mail days, Amazon Prime is your best friend. Now, not everything ships. I tried to order a stapler, and for whatever reason, they couldn't ship to my village. For the most part, everything ships. And like I said, Amazon Prime is still qualifies. At least in the village that I was in, we could still use Amazon Prime and we could get the free shipping. However, it didn't ship in 2 days. It took 1 to 3 weeks. For the most part, like 1.5 to 2 was the average. I did receive, I ordered book bins for my classroom, and I got those in like 4 or 5 days, which everyone was just mind blown that if they came that quickly. I ordered a Hydro Flask because mine had gotten stolen, and that took 3 weeks. A laminator took almost a month. But everything else, and I ordered a lot, I probably more than I should have. But anyway, Amazon Prime, they do ship. It just 2 weeks was the average. But it is your best friend, you guys, because you don't have stores to go to. So I used to order that Justin's almond butter. He has a vanilla, or the company has a vanilla almond butter that's out, and I would order that on there. So there's just certain things that we would get there. Like I said, I ordered a laminator, book bins, all those kinds of things. I tried to order a stapler, but it wouldn't ship. So certain things won't ship, but it's also because my village only had P.O. boxes, and no one ever taught me how to ship to a non-P.O. box. But there is a workaround apparently. I didn't know about it, so I just kind of sucked it up, and I had someone from civilization, as we called it, ship me a stapler. So it's just Amazon Prime is your best friend. I highly recommend it, though I'm pretty sure like everybody has it these days. The next big one, this one is huge for sanity purposes. You will need a hobby. For me, it was coloring. My housemate and I, she ended up being like my teacher bestie. We colored more than you could ever imagine. We had a ridiculous collection of like colored pencils, markers, crayons. I mean, you name it, we had it. All different types. We had felt tips and, you know, fine tips and so many. I have like 100 pack of colored pencils, which I didn't even know they sold until I was like, I really need more colors. So things like that, you need hobbies. Some people will sew, other people learn beading, some people took up hunting. Whatever it may be, you need a hobby. It is dark a lot in the winter. If you are not moving there with a spouse or anything, it can get lonely. It's just, the days are long, the nights are long, so you need a hobby. You need something to do. And regardless, I mean, you should have a hobby, but there especially, you need a hobby. And for me, it was coloring. I really, really enjoyed the coloring, and I planned to do vlogging, but like I said, with the internet issues, it was not an option, even if I wanted to, so I kind of just kicked it to the curb. And as much as that sucked, because I really wanted to document my first teaching experience, it wasn't an option. So I turned to coloring. I had I think it's called My Secret Garden or something like that, the coloring book. And that one, I had How Teachers Swear was one of my favorites, but we used to have random people send us coloring books from like all over the place, and we loved it. That was our thing. On Friday nights, I would come home from school, I'd get my dinner, I'd go down to my housemate's apartment, and we would just color and talk and whatnot, and it was just so awesome, so relaxing. At night, if I couldn't sleep, I would sit there and color, and it was just, you need a hobby. I am telling you, if you're gonna do this, find something you like to do for hours on end. And it was difficult for me because I get very bored very easily. I don't stick with anything that I start, which is terrible to say as an educator. It's the truth. We all have different personalities. I am not the type to finish anything that I start. So for me, finding something that I could do for hours on end was crucial. And for whatever reason, coloring was it. I haven't touched it since I've been back, but in the village, it was coloring for me. So, honestly, overall, the experience is like no other. Like I said in the beginning, I would recommend this to anyone that loves adventure, that loves a challenge. And I mean, it was a wonderful experience, but like I said, it didn't come without its challenges. I went probably a week and a half, almost 2 weeks at school without a printer or a copier because both happened to break at the same time. And it's not like you can just call in a service person, you know, they have to be phoned in and then flown in. So went almost 2 weeks without a printer or a copier. And within that time, we lost power. So it's not like I could even do Kahoot or anything. We had no power. We had no internet for 2 days. It was just, it's a challenge. And it's kind of why I wanted this. So we all know that with social media, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, so be it, whatever it is, we know that these Pinterest perfect classrooms and activities are taking over our lives. We're all striving to be that Pinterest perfect teacher. And I knew that teaching in a remote village, I couldn't do any of that stuff because I couldn't go to the store and get fun little activities or, you know, decor items or anything like that. I knew that teaching in a remote village with no access to stores or other outside resources was going to force me to be a better teacher. That's why I went to Alaska. I wanted to be a better educator. I love the cutesy stuff, don't get me wrong, I love it. But I didn't want my first year of teaching to be hyper focused on being Pinterest perfect. I wanted to become a better teacher. Now, I will say, it was hard. You know, I was doing a unit on landforms with my students, and there was nothing more than I wanted to do an activity that had, you know, Tupperware containers and sand and whatnot, and just to kind of show them physically how things are done. But that wasn't an option. And it made me realize that I could be that fun Pinteresty type of person, but only because it benefits my kids, not because it's for the likes and the comments and the followers. It's because I want to help my students. And that was really the one thing, and that I told my mom is a teacher as well, and I told her, I said, I want to go to Alaska because it's going to force me, especially as a new teacher, to focus on quality teaching and not just having a cute classroom and cute activities. Yes, that stuff's important, but that doesn't make or break my students and them thriving. If my classroom is plain, or in this case, if it was all stuff that was already there to begin with, guess what? They're still going to learn the same thing whether I have an adorable little anchor chart with wonderful scent-filled markers or just writing on the board, because that's all I had. I didn't have the other options and resources that other educators have. And it made me realize that, yes, that stuff helps, but it's not what's most important. So working in a remote village like that, your relationships with students are completely different. I saw my students outside of school. So sometimes I would ride the bus to school, I would see my students. Go to church, see my students. Ride the bus home, see my students. Sit at home, see my students. Yes, students will come visit you. Like, you need to set boundaries. We finally made 10 p.m. our cutoff at our apartment building because we had students knocking on our door at 10 o'clock a.m. or 10 o'clock p.m. just to say, hi, how are you? We missed you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. So you need to set boundaries because relationships with students are completely different there. You see their parents outside of school. You see students outside of school. And they are so excited to see you, you know, like any teacher is excited to see their child. But you see them at the store, you see them walking down the road, you see them on the bus, you see them, like I said, while you're at home. And we had students knocking on our doors constantly. Because the people in my building worked at 3 different schools. 2 worked at the pre-K 2 school. I worked at the 3-5 school, and our other housemate, he worked at the 6-12 school. So you got to know everybody in the village because they would come to say hi to one teacher and you'd all be hanging out and you'd end up getting to know them. So your relationships with students are completely different. They are very open with you. You being a small community, you know things about them that you probably shouldn't know, about their family and all of that stuff. I mean, you get to know them in a way that you never expected that you would get to know these kids. And I mean, for example, one of them, she completely fell in love with me because I gave her a tube of toothpaste. She walked into my apartment because they come to visit, and she goes, oh my gosh, you have toothpaste, I wish I had some. And I was like, well, just take it. And for the last 2 months that I was there, that's all I heard about was how she is so happy that she gets to brush her teeth every day. And you build a different type of relationship with the students when you work in a village, and it's one that it can't be explained, but I'm trying my best. But it's just a whole nother level. But you have to set boundaries. Like I said, we finally made the cutoff at our apartment at 10 p.m. and it's just because if not, I don't want to say they won't go away like it's a negative thing. They're craving the attention, and they need that time, and they need the attention. And you have to have a stopping point. You need to separate your professional life and your personal life. And that's just, it's hard to find that line, but you'll find what works for you and what works for your community. Another thing that I learned there that made the experience completely worth it is I learned that I have the ability to do without. Like I said, you know, self-service, non-existent. You know, resources for cute things in the classroom, non-existent. Wi-Fi sometimes didn't happen. I had no microwave. I had, you know, clothes that, yeah, they were suited for where I was living, but they weren't perfect. And it's just, you learn that you have the ability to do without. You learn to adjust, and you learn to do without social media and, you know, having access to other hobbies. You have one hobby because it's all you bring with you, and you just learn all these different things about yourself. And my favorite thing that I learned about myself is I have the ability to do without. I can keep myself entertained. I'm resourceful. And I feel like anyone that teaches in a village where you don't have access to these things every day, this is something you're going to learn about yourself too. And I can't recommend it enough, because that is a wonderful quality to have. And I feel like it's made me that much better of a person, you know, professionally speaking, but also personally speaking. I don't complain about slow Wi-Fi anymore, or, you know, slow download speeds when I'm just using regular data, and keep myself entertained. And, oh, if I don't have, you know, this item for dinner, I can make it work with this. So it's just, I've learned to be a lot more flexible in life because of this, and I'm so, so thankful for that trait that I've now acquired. So I got an Instagram message from a girl who is also thinking about teaching in remote Alaska, and I wanted to answer some of these questions because these are questions that I actually get pretty often, but I wanted to read them directly from here. So I have to find it first though. So her first question was, how is my lifestyle? Is it easy to get in and out of the village? So my lifestyle, I love photography. I'm outdoorsy, but I'm also very girly, I guess you could say. You know, I like pretty cute things, but I also like being outside. I like fresh air. I like seeing new places, new things. So hiking, kayaking, all of that stuff were things that I like to do, which is why I knew that I would be okay in Alaska, because those are hobbies that you need to have there. You need to be an outdoorsy person, or else you're gonna go stir crazy, or at least that's my opinion. Is it easy to get in and out of the village? Yes and no. Feasibly, yes, it is easy. For me, it was just a plane ride. For a lot of villages, all it is a plane ride or two. However, is it cheap? Mm-mm. So my village, there used to be 2 airlines. Now it is one, is Raven Airlines. And oh, goodness gracious. They are like the DMV of the airplane world. Oh my word. Impossible to work with. Things would not arrive on time. Like, the planes would be hours late because, you know, you don't have connections or anything to worry about, apparently. So planes would be hours late. That's if it would even arrive at all. If it was a little bit foggy, they wouldn't fly. I remember the one time our plane got canceled because they couldn't find a pilot. Like, just things like that. So that wouldn't be a huge deal if they charged according to their customer service, but they don't. Round trip airfare is like $500 or $600, which is asinine because it's 300 miles. That's all you're flying. But you don't have a choice. There's one airline, they have no competitors, they get to charge whatever they want. So it's not easy when it comes to that, but you don't really have a choice. So yes and no, it's easy to get in and out because you can fly, and they have flights every day, but weather pending, and it's expensive, very expensive. So yes and no, it is easy, but it's not easy, I guess. It depends. Let's see what else. This one is actually really great. Do the natives accept you easily? Yes. So for me personally, they did. I went to potlucks. I made myself known in the community. I introduced myself. I get to know them. One of my students, her mom was in the village, but she lived with her aunt, and you need to learn those little nuances, because if you say, oh, you're so-and-so's mom, they will correct you, and they are not happy about it if you don't know, you know, what child lives with who. So yes, for me personally, they accepted me easily, but that's because I put myself out there. You know, I made them know that I'm not there to change anything. I'm not there to change their culture. I'm just there to learn about them and, you know, teach their kids a thing or two. So I had really good luck with, you know, assimilating into their culture and into the village. Not everybody was that lucky. You know, people that keep to themselves or just have loud, boisterous type personalities, they did not adjust well. Natives overall, where I was, were very quiet people. They're very private. They're very quiet. They're quiet people. So if you're a quiet individual, you'll be fine. But I'm not sure if they're like that in all villages. I can only speak for the one that I worked in. But for the most part, yes, they accepted me very easily and I had no problems. Next great question is it easy to adjust to living in such a remote area? Yes, it was for me. Now, I grew up in South Jersey in a very, very small suburb of Philadelphia. And by small, I say 7,000 because that's small for New Jersey. So, you know, I had 4 or 5 shopping malls within 20 minutes. I had probably 6 or 7 Targets within 25, 30 minutes of my house. Convenience is a huge thing. We had trains, buses, airport. Like, convenience is key. So moving from here, I moved to Maine when I was 21 years old, and that was a little more remote. You know, the nearest shopping mall was 2 hours away. The nearest Target's an hour and a half away. We had a grocery store. They finally built a Walmart a couple of years ago. So I went from convenience to suburb / rural. I mean, it was kind of a little mixture of both. I mean, it was definitely a suburb, but compared to what I was used to, it's very rural. But moving from Maine to Alaska, it was honestly the equivalent of moving from New Jersey to Maine. It was very similar, but a little bit different. For the most part, yes, as long as you were mentally prepared. I knew that, you know, clothing had to be, I knew that everything had to be shipped in. I knew that it was going to be expensive getting things there. I knew that I needed to have a hobby. I knew that I knew that it was going to be different from what I was used to. I did a lot of research, and I can't recommend do your research. Everything, you can be prepared as you want to be if you just do your research. Alaska Teacher Placement is a wonderful resource. I believe the website is alaskateacher.org. I will link that down below. They have a forum. They have just web pages about what to expect, what to do. Like, oh, you're hired, now what? A lot of things that I learned from there. I just Google what is it like to teach in Alaska, or what is it like to teach in remote Alaska, or just remote Alaska. I watched a lot of TV shows and those kinds of things. Just do your research. Be prepared. So for me, yes, it was easy to adjust to living in a remote village because I knew what to expect for the most part. I mean, there were things that you can prepare for all you want, but until you get there and experience it, you have no idea what you're in for. But overall, if you do your research and you are somewhat prepared, you will be fine. Her next question, how do the children accept you? Like I said, they're very quiet people. They're very reserved. The children, it took them probably 2 or 3 days before they really started to open up. My first day, my 4th graders barely talked to me. I left, I started on a Wednesday. We came back from winter break on a Wednesday, and it wasn't until Friday where they really actually started to ask me questions that they wanted to know about me. It was more of me just talking to them. And once they realized that, like, hey, this person's here to stay, oh my goodness, they were so accepting and so welcoming and so loving and caring. And my 5th graders, they opened up a little more easily, but that's just their personality. They're a very rambunctious, open, outgoing group. My 4th graders were much more reserved. But overall, I mean, children are always accepting of people that are kind and friendly and caring. I knew students from the high school. I knew students from the pre-K2 school. They are just incredibly accepting. There were students that I don't even know how they knew my name, but they'd be like, I'd be walking down the street or through the store and they'd be like, hey, Miss Morrow. And it was so nice to know that I was accepted in their community and that the students really knew that I was there because I cared. They knew that I was there to stay. So that was my biggest thing. I knew that the students had accepted me because they really opened up. They would talk to me and they would say hi, and I would get hugs and all kinds of things. But yeah, the students really, really are accepting as long as you genuinely care. Students, I mean, this is anywhere you teach. Students know if you're there just for a paycheck. They know. They're not stupid. They can pick up on that. As long as you genuinely care about them and their well-being, you're fine. You're fine. And then, like I said, that applies to anywhere you teach. Her other question was, I would be going alone, so my biggest concern is that I would be super isolated or that something terrible would happen and I'd never be able to get out of the village. that is completely normal. I mean, heck, that crossed my mind even when I was already living there. There is insurance for Medevac. As far as health concerns and health scares go, there is an insurance for Medevac. It's like $120 a year, because LifeFlight's like $60,000 to $100,000 if you have to get Medevaced out of a village. But Alaska does offer, and I don't remember the name of the program. If I can find it, I'll link it down below. They do offer an insurance type policy for Medevac or LifeFlight, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's about $120 a year, and it covers you. Well worth it. A lot of people do that. I personally didn't, and I realized that that was taking a gamble, but that was a gamble that I was willing to take, especially because I didn't learn about it until I'd already been there for 3 or 4 months. And at that point, it wasn't worth it for another 2 months. So that is completely normal thing to worry about. And honestly, that just goes to show that your mind's in the right place. So if you're thinking health concerns, yes, I would definitely recommend that LifeFlight Medevac insurance. Wonderful, wonderful thing to have. And as I remember the second part of the question. Super isolated. Yes and no. This is a tough one to answer. So physically speaking and geographically speaking, yes, you're isolated, about as isolated as you could be. However, don't forget that most villages, you're not the only teacher there. There are teachers that are also from away. They're from the lower 48, and they were in the same boat that you're in now, and they want to help you. You know, I got to the village and I had people asking me if I needed anything. Did I need any food? I didn't have pots and pans because they took forever to arrive because of Amazon. So I had, you know, teachers offering pots and pans, and you will be isolated geographically speaking more than personally speaking. People overall, as long as I said you're a kind person, they are incredibly welcoming. They are willing to help you out as much as they can. So yes, you are isolated, you know, as far as you can't just go to the store and get what you need. But I don't know, like, you're not isolated because you make so many wonderful friendships and relationships with people. And I've met some of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life in these villages. And I'm so grateful for the experience that it was worth the geographical isolation. I mean, that was an experience in and of itself. But I met some wonderful people. You know, my housemates were great. I met a lot of wonderful kids, both that were my students and not my students. I made a lot of wonderful connections, and I feel like some of them would be lifelong as well. So yes, you may be isolated for the first couple weeks until, you know, you kind of find your groove and you get used to people, but you're really not that isolated. Teaching in a remote village, it sounds a lot worse than it is. It's something that I wouldn't change for the world. It's an experience like no other, and I feel like everyone should experience it. Just, if you like a challenge, this is something that I can't recommend enough. Another question that I get a lot, and it makes me laugh, but is it dark all the time? So yes and no. When I got there in January, the sun didn't rise until like 11 a.m., but it also set at like 3:30. So the majority of my teaching day was spent in darkness. And by the time I left school, it was already dark because we got dismissed at 3:45 and the sun had already set. So yes, it was dark. Go to sleep in the dark, wake up in the dark. But by like mid-April, early April or so, it got significantly lighter longer. By the time I left, the sun was already rising at like 4 something in the morning or 5 something in the morning, and it was setting after 11, I want to say. I think it was after 11. By the time that I left in June, I mean, it was 3 o'clock and it was still twilight. If I can insert a picture, I will. But yeah, it was 3:30 in the morning. I think I had gone out with some friends, and it was still light out. And I don't mean like, you know, daylight type light, but it was light enough where if you were driving, you'd have headlights, you'd be fine. Like, it was almost like a light twilight, but it's hard to adjust to. So yes, it is dark a lot, but it's also the land of the midnight sun, you guys. So 6 months light, 6 months darkness. Now, the farther north you go, the more drastic that is, but I was in Anchorage, you know, that general level. But yes, it is dark a lot. Yes, it is also light a lot. So it all depends on what part of the state you're in. But like I said, the farther north you go, the more drastic those changes are. But it was something that you get used to. Well, I say you get used to it. You really don't, because When I first got there, with the combination of just the lack of daylight and jet lag, I slept all the time. My housemates used to make fun of me because I would go to sleep at like 6 o'clock in the afternoon and I'd wake up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd just be like, oh my God, I want more sleep. So that was, you know, hard to adjust to. And then by the time the end of the school year rolled around, I was like sleep deprived because I would be up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because it's still, you know, relatively light outside compared to what I'm used to. And sorry, I have something in my eye. You know, compared to what I'm used to, and I would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning because it's still daylight out. It was so hard to adjust to. You know, I had blackout curtains are your best friend. Now, they only do so much. Physically, yes, I had no daylight in my room. However, mentally, like, I knew it was so light out, and being an outdoorsy person that I am, I'm just like, I want to be outside. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in bed. Like, I want to be out seeing things. I want to be out seeing if I can find a moose or a wolf or whatever. I really didn't want to run into a wolf. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't want to be cooped up in my apartment. I wanted to be outside exploring and doing things, and it was just so hard to know that it was light outside and I was wasting time sleeping. So yes, it's drastic, but you know, you get used to it, and it was a cool experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I will say, you know, when I came back to New Jersey to visit family, my first night back here, I was helping my dad take out the trash, and I stopped on the front porch, and he kind of looked at me and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's dark outside. Like, I hadn't seen pure darkness for months. So that was just so weird to me. And even now, like, it's still so odd that, like, you know, I went out to the bar with a couple of friends last night and it was midnight and it was dark outside. Like, I was used to it still being like light outside at midnight. So those are just, you know, the little quirks of living somewhere that, you know, that far north. But it's cool. It was an amazing experience. And honestly, like, I get very emotional talking about it. The best 6 months of my life. You know, it was hard being away from my family. It was hard being away from my dogs, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. To experience a place as raw and just incredible. You know, the village that I taught in, they're just so set in their ways, and so many things are just so old-fashioned, and it's almost like living in the past for a little bit. And honestly, like, I loved that. I thought that was, I got to experience something that not many other people get to experience in their life. I got to experience another culture. I got to learn another language. I got to experience just another way of life. And I feel like there's no price to put on that. And yes, there is a price to put because it's expensive to get your things in and out of Alaska. But if you have the means to do it, it is worth every single penny. I spent, oh gosh, probably close to $3,000 between airfare and shipping things in and out. And then coming home, I spent probably about $2,000, $2,500. So it's expensive. But like I said, if you have the means to do it, the experience is worth every single penny. Like, I can't stress that enough. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But it was just one of the coolest experiences, and I'm sad to have left. I honestly, until about a week ago, I had still been applying for jobs in Anchorage because I really wanted to experience life on the road system, and I love Anchorage. I fell in love with it. It's like an adult outdoorsy person's playground. It was amazing. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, fortunately, I ended up getting a job offer back in Maine, and I am very excited. I am heartbroken that I don't get to spend more time in Alaska, but I'm still young, you know, I'm single, it's just me and my dog, so who knows, you know, in the future I may get a job there, I might attempt to apply there again. But in the meantime, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is the path that I'm meant to be on, and I'm just so thankful that I got to experience what I did in Alaska. I made amazing friendships and relationships, and both with my students and other adults, other teachers, people in the community. It was just an experience like no other. I saw a lot of trauma in my students' lives and things that they just shouldn't have experienced, but the way that they persevere and they just keep going and they don't let it, you know, they don't let it run their life is just, it's inspiring. It truly is. So if you can go to Alaska to teach, if it's something you're interested in, please do it. They need caring professionals. They need people that want to be there. They need people that know what they're getting themselves into. So if you've watched this video this far, it is something clearly that either you just find Alaska fascinating or something you're interested in doing. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments down below. I will drop my email down there. Please do not hesitate to ask me any questions. I also am going to link down below the website that I used for a lot of my personal research when I was looking for a job in Alaska. It's Alaska Teacher Placement, and I believe it's alaskateacher.org. I'm not positive, don't hold me to that, but I will put it in the description. I can't recommend it enough. Like I said, there's a forum. All of their jobs get posted on there, so their job bank, every single job that's open in the state and school district is on there. They have information. They host job fairs, 2 in Anchorage. I think there's 1 in the spring, 1 in the summer, and then they also hold job fairs at Penn State, 1 in Texas, I forget where else, but they hold job fairs throughout the country, throughout the year. So if you watched this far, please, if you have ever thought about teaching in Alaska, please do it. I cannot recommend it enough. It's a wonderful experience, both personally and professionally, and it's a great challenge. So if you love Alaska, or you're thinking about teaching in Alaska, or you just like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I know it's probably pretty long, so if you've watched this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, or you've taught in Alaska, or you are thinking about doing it and you just want some more specific answers, please drop them in the comments down below. I will do my best to get back to you. If you have not yet, please subscribe. I am doing a 2018-19 announcement soon, talking all about my new position. I'm signing my contract probably tonight or tomorrow, so once that is signed and sent off, I will update you guys on all of that information. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.